Okay, so last night the Minnesota Timberwolves were eliminated from the 2025 NBA playoffs. And I know there's a lot of takeaways from this series, how dominant OKC is. And before we even get started with the Minnesota Timberwolves, I just want to say that all the Oklahoma City Thunder love that they are going to be getting over the next week is rightfully so. This is a team that has been an all-time defense throughout the entire year while missing pivotal players like Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren. They have one of the deepest rosters in the NBA. They have multiple all-NBA level defenders. They have one of the greatest guards in NBA history, and they have a really good coach as well. So while everybody's going to be talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is rightfully deserved, I want to talk about what's next for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I want to say this Minnesota Timberwolves team did fall short. But coming into this season, when Karl Anthony Towns was traded for Julius Randle, a lot of people were saying that this is probably going to be a gap year for the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is obviously a move that you wanted to dump some salary off of. Julius Randle is coming off the books after this season. Karl Anthony Towns is one of the 10 highest paid players in the NBA. This is obviously a salary dump, and the Minnesota Timberwolves probably weren't going to make it back to the conference finals this year in theory. And about halfway through the season, that looked like it was going to happen. The Minnesota Timberwolves were about 8th or 9th seed in the NBA or in the Western Conference through the All-Star break. Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert just could not get their chemistry together, and Anthony Edwards looked like he had to overexert himself offensively night after night for the Timberwolves to win consistently. And coming into the season, I think Anthony Edwards had a lot of clear limitations. As a playmaker, as somebody that plays within the middle of the floor, I think he could have gotten better there. But one of the biggest improvements that I've seen from any player in NBA history is the three-point shooting jump that Anthony Edwards took. Last season, Anthony Edwards was shooting about 6 threes a game and making about 37% of them. This year, he's shooting about 10 a game and making 40% of them. And it's a multitude of ways: as a pull-up shooter, a shooter out of the pick and roll, a shooter off of pin downs, and off motion, off ball, spotting up. Anthony Edwards was shooting the ball like one of the best players in the league. He finished the season with the most three-pointers made this season at 420. And I've had conversations like this before. I've said this before. When you have a player that's this good in Anthony Edwards and the progression is so clear with him, that makes that player extremely dangerous, because you know it's so obvious what the improvement is for Anthony Edwards that there's truly no ceiling on how good he can be. But in a series like this against this all-time defense, the Oklahoma City Thunder are going to make sure that these really good players show their weaknesses. They did it against Jokic. They did it against Ja, Jaren Jackson. They're going to do it against all the players that they go against. They just have a solution to every problem every team in the NBA can give them, whether it's a team that's extremely big with a team like the Denver Nuggets, whether it's a team that's ran by a guard like a Jalen Brunson or Tyrese Halliburton that they can't be seeing in the next round. They just have a multitude of rim protection, size, versatility, and point of attack defense that it's very overwhelming for a number one offensive player to really overcome. And with all that being said, Anthony Edwards still did a really good job in games 2 and 3. He was averaging 31 points per game on 69% true shooting throughout those 2 games. But over time, in Game 4 especially, we saw the Oklahoma City Thunder do what they do best, and that's shut down the best player. They were denying the ball from Anthony Edwards, and it was making it really hard for him to get shots off. Over that Game 4, he took 2 shots in the first half. 2 shots. And what's crazy about that is that's not even the worst thing he could have done. A lot of people were saying over the discourse of Game 4 that Anthony Edwards should have taken more shots, where those shots just would not have been good shots. Anthony Edwards would have to shoot over 2 defenders consistently. He would have to force drives to the middle. He would have to force a lot of long threes and play really from the corner or from the half court, because that's where the doubles were sending him. Instead, Anthony Edwards did a lot of pick and roll actions. He got a lot of cuts to the rim. He got a lot of pin downs, rotating around the perimeter and then turning the corner to get to the rim. And he did a lot of collapsing, and he made a lot of really good passes to open shooters. In that game, the Minnesota Timberwolves shot, I think, 50% from 3 in that game on 41 attempts, if my memory does help me in this situation. And I feel as though he was making the right read multiple times in that series. It's just as a scorer, he could not be effective. And one of the things I noticed, which is something that I want to talk about Anthony Edwards' improvement, is they were giving up the in-between game, because Anthony Edwards is a career, or not even a career, this season he was shooting about 38% from mid-range. And in that game, it looked like he was either taking the 3 or he was going all the way to the rim, which by the numbers, that's very efficient. Getting to the rim or shooting the 3, that's probably what a lot of NBA coaches would want you to do. But if you're getting given that mid-range shot consistently, you have to be able to knock that down. Whether it's a floater, mid-range pull-up from about 15 to 16 feet, Anthony Edwards has to add that to his game. And it's not even like he's getting bad looks. Anthony Edwards has gotten really good looks. He has the athleticism and ball handle to create good looks from mid-range consistently. They're just not falling. And coming into these playoffs, I definitely believe that he's gotten better as a playmaker, but I still didn't think he was there. And I still don't think he's there, but he's definitely shown improvement because over the season, I've seen portions in clutch time offense where he would shoot his team out the game because he just was not there as a playmaker, or he necessarily did not trust his teammates as much. So as of right now, I still think Anthony Edwards is a top 10 to 12 player in the NBA, but I think that there's still a gap between him and SGA, and a lot of people were trying to push that conversation when this series started. I still think there's a gap, and I think some of these reasons are due to that. But going into this offseason, the Minnesota Timberwolves have some people they need to pay. And this is the part that is confusing because you trade Karl Anthony Towns over to the New York Knicks for Julius Randle, which at the time was shocking, but you could understand where the Minnesota Timberwolves were coming from. Karl Anthony Towns was a guy that is a top 10 highest paid player in the NBA, and his production doesn't necessarily match top 10 highest paid player in the NBA. So they move off of Cat. They bring in Julius Randle, who's going to be having to get re-signed this offseason. He has a player option worth $30 million. Now, a lot of us thought he was not going to live up to the $30 million a year contract that he was going to have, so he was going to opt into his player option. But this playoffs, Julius Randle has really turned a new leaf, and even towards the end of the regular season, Julius Randle has turned a new leaf. He moved a lot quicker with the ball in his hand. He made decisions a lot faster. He was knocking down his shot. He showed effort on defense, and a lot of those things are probably going to go into contract negotiations to where Julius Randle's probably going to want somewhere around $37 to $40 million a year. And that puts Minnesota in a tricky situation because you also have to sign Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid, two guys that can go and start anywhere else in the NBA. And when you have guys like that, there are going to be some teams in the Western Conference who just offer this high of a deal so Minnesota can match it. I wouldn't be surprised if there's teams in the Western Conference saying, look, I know you guys are probably going to match any deal, but because we have it, we're going to overpay for this guy and dare you guys to match it. And one of the biggest things that I talk about within these championship teams are roster versatility. You have to have guys off the bench that can play in any type of versatile roster. We saw it with we saw it against the Lakers. The Lakers ran a lot of 5-out offense with their small ball lineup. The Minnesota Timberwolves were able to match that and still be way bigger than the Lakers. And if you lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker or especially Naz Reid, you're going to be losing out on what makes this Minnesota Timberwolves team so good. So there's definitely a lot of decisions to make for the Minnesota Timberwolves this offseason, but I think one of the biggest things for this team in the offseason is to get back Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid, even if you don't bring back Julius Randle. And one of my biggest team needs for this Minnesota Timberwolves team is to get a legit point guard. We all love Mike Conley. I think Mike Conley is the veteran's veteran. You know, this is somebody who's been in situations. He's a very smart player. He's one of those players that you would love to have if you were a rookie. You can just learn and soak a lot of knowledge from him. But I just don't think Mike Conley is a starting level point guard for a championship team anymore, which is okay. I think he's 37 or 38 years old. I think it's time for him to come off the bench. But what makes this situation tricky is I don't think Rob Dillingham is ready to be a starting point guard for a championship team yet either. So I would say one of the biggest needs they need to address in the offseason is to go get a point guard. And they have the 17th pick in the draft, which is still a really good pick. But when you look at the 17th range, when you look at some of the point guards in this draft, you have a Jaeger Demon who may be in this spot, a Nolan Traore, a Cam Jones. Do any of you guys think that these guys can step in and be impactful immediately? I don't think so. So when you look around the league for some teams that may have something that you can give them that they desperately need. And I look over at the Eastern Conference, and there's a team that needs some floor spacing desperately, especially at the two-guard position, and that's the Orlando Magic. And what do you have? A floor spacing shooting guard in Dante DiVincenzo. I don't think it's crazy to send Dante DiVincenzo and the 17th pick in the draft over to the Orlando Magic for Anthony Black. Anthony Black is a 6'7" point guard who can handle, defend, make proper passes, and put 2 feet in the paint consistently. Now, I know he's not the most efficient, and there still are some levels that he has to progress with, but Anthony Edwards is still 23 years old. Jaden McDaniels is still very young. This team has time to progress, and I think Anthony Black does provide a floor to where he can make the proper pass, have the athleticism to get 2 feet in the paint, and can defend on a high level. And I don't have an official trade ready just yet, but I think this is probably going to be the basis around the trade. Orlando gets a floor settings two guard that you can pair next to Jalen Suggs. And they also get the 17th pick in the draft to where they can do whatever they want with that and have 3 picks in the first round. So if they want to stick and pick with all 3 of those picks, they can, but they can also use 2 of those first round picks to go land a guy like Anthony Simons. Who knows? And the last thing I'm going to be talking about in this video is the development. I think there are 4 guys that are going to have to take that. I wouldn't say take the leap, but these guys' development is going to have to be prioritized this offseason. That's Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, Terrence Shannon Jr., and Rob Dillingham. I think Terrence Shannon's shown this playoffs that he can be very impactful for a championship team, to where if you lose out on Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Terrence Shannon may be able to come in and fit that role just a little bit for next season or the year after that and maybe live up to that role that Nickeil Alexander-Walker set. As for Rob Dillingham, I think for Rob Dillingham, and I said this a few days ago on Player's Choice, I think Rob Dillingham doesn't have to overdo what the Timberwolves are probably going to ask for him if he is the starting point guard sometime between next year. I don't think he's going to start the year as the starting point guard, but I think he's going to go within some time of the season being the starting point guard if that is the only option. I think he's just going to have to make reads consistently, knock down open shots, and just be more aggressive on defense. The best part about having one of the best rim protectors the league has ever seen is you can be aggressive on defense. I think Rob Dillingham is going to have to be aggressive on defense, knowing that Rudy Gobert is right behind him to protect the rim. And I necessarily wouldn't have any lineups to where Rob Dillingham is out there with a Naz Reid or a Julius Randle at the small ball 5, because they may not have the speed or the verticality to protect the rim at the level that Rudy Gobert does, and Rob Dillingham can possibly make multiple mistakes on the defensive side on the floor. But if he can be a pick and roll candidate, somebody that can hit Ant on screens and hit Ant in the pick and roll, I think that's something he could do pretty well. And if he can knock down shots consistently, I think he could be a productive point guard if it comes down to that. Now, as for Jaden McDaniels shown this season that he can be a scorer. It's like earlier this season, they were using Jaden McDaniels as an off-ball scorer, as a spot-up shooter, and that's just not what he is. We've seen multiple times in the playoffs now at this point to where he's driving to the bucket multiple times a game. He's attacking closeouts, he's knocking down shots, he's getting to the free throw line, and he's also a hell of a point of attack defender, to where you want to build this to where you can maybe get a 21, 22 point per game type of guy. And I'm not even talking about some offensive superstar. If he could be a Jaylen Brown level player, I think that's really good for the Timberwolves. And the last guy, and I don't think we talk about this as much because Anthony Edwards is already a top 15 player lock. For some people, he's a top 10 player, but there's still such a level that he can get better at, and that's what they should prioritize. I don't think the Timberwolves should be okay with, you know what, Ant's a top 10 player, we're going to leave it there. No, if Ant can be a top 3 to top 5 player in the NBA, you should strive for that. And if he's going to play make at the level he did in the Lakers series, or even at the level he did in the conference finals, and he can knock down that mid-range shot consistently, we're looking at a top 5 player in the NBA. And if Ant can be that consistent playmaker, maybe you just go get some more sides and shooting at the point guard position, and you just really build this team around Ant's skill sets specifically. But all in all, I still think this Minnesota Timberwolves team is still really good. They have a lot of very young talent. They also have some win now talent in Rudy Gobert, Julius Randle, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Dante DiVincenzo, to where you can bring in some more talent through the draft, through trade, through free agency. You can re-sign the talent, and I think this Minnesota Timberwolves team is on its way. And I think next year they're going to be much higher than the 6th seed. And this is why the Western Conference is always going to be tougher than the East. You're going to have the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are going to get better this offseason. The Lakers, who are going to get better this offseason. OKC, who's probably the clear-cut favorite next season going into the NBA season. The Dallas Mavericks, who just got Cooper Flag, and everybody's going to be healthy. But I truly do believe there's a world where the Minnesota Timberwolves will be hosting the playoffs next season, or at least hosting maybe the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys like this type of content, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you guys check out the bottom left corner of this video, and you guys follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Make sure you guys subscribe and turn on the post notification bell. Make sure you guys follow my playback room, where we are going to be breaking down every historic game or multiple historic games and talking about rumors and narratives that people push from these games. And with all that being said, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.